On this episode, we talk about how do you get more strategic rather than an order taker, and how can you build your brand around what you stand for. A lot of us struggle with, how do we start, even though we actually do this for clients. But it's a really interesting conversation, and I think you'll really love it. All right. Hey, Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So tell us who you are and what do you do?
So I am Juju Hook. I've been a brand strategist for 30 some years. I started out on the corporate side in financial industry and then opened my own agency in 2000. And in 2015, I closed my agency and made a move toward helping women in midlife build theirs.
Awesome. And so how did you get started in the 2000s? Like I started our agency in 99. So it was kind of like the wild, wild west back
Was
then.
the Wild West. So I worked in the financial industry for some years, and then I became a marketing director for Jacuzzi and ran their brands worldwide, 63 countries. And that was a wild ride. I started in banking and automotive, and was raised with car dealers, but hot tub dealers was a whole nother deal. That was just a completely different perspective on branding. And then I got pregnant and I had an international job. I was flying all over. It was just the kind of thing where I knew I was going to either need to take time off work or make a switch in what I was doing. And so I decided to become a free agent and ended up working for Jacuzzi as a consultant and launched an agency when my son was an infant.
Oh, that's cool. So Jacuzzi was your first client?
Jacuzzi was my last job and my first client. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've seen that a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
they don't want to lose you. And they're like, well, just be a consultant for us on this.
And strategy is a funny thing, right? Because if you're the one that's been writing the plans, oftentimes that's what they'll ask you to come back for, right? It's a plan and somebody else can implement it. And I've always been keen on that anyway. I've always been more interested in the 30,000 foot view than the minutia. So, which I think helps an agency owner.
Yeah, and that really separates a lot of people. My background was kind of the complete opposite. Like we started the agency basically from doing
Yep.
websites.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard. And I find it very hard for people once they're the doers and they're getting paid to do something.
Yes.
It's hard to go to the strategy.
I
Right.
think
And
so too.
they never can think. They're just like, they're just all project based. Even if they do
Mm-hmm.
recurring, they're still basically just trading time for money, but they're not really getting that intellectual, property. So how do you think, for those people listening, how do you think they can be more strategic rather than kind of the order takers?
So I think, first of all, I think that kind of thinking, to be honest, is something that you have a proclivity for. So I think, interestingly enough, the first time I took the Strengths Finders, strategy was my number one strength, and it said this is something you're born with, right? So I think we all have a proclivity towards certain ways of thinking, but strategist if you're tied to the bottom line of your client. So if you can take the time to understand your client's financial statements and the financial goals and struggles that your clients have, it'll put you in a more strategic role. So it's not about managing the project. It's about how does the project contribute to whatever their overall goals are. And I don't know that that is a comfortable position for everybody who works, especially on the creative side of the agency world. But it is the difference between rising up through the ranks and staying where you're at in project management.
Yeah, I almost think about it. It's about asking the right questions in order to, figure out the end outcome. That's kind of how I got out of that mindset of going, man, how do I get Lotus Cars to come to us and be like, this is the problem I have, rather
Yes.
than go design me this microsite or this website or this
Yeah.
banner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, tactics we pull together tactics to employ a strategy. And if you don't understand what the strategy is, right? And the strategy is not really driven by goals that you understand, then you're always going to be separated from where the action really is. And I think our value in terms of being able to implement the strategies that our clients want is directly related to how long we get to serve them.
Awesome. Well, take us through kind of the 15-year journey in the
Yeah.
agency, and then, tell us about, at the end, kind of why did you close up?
So I started with a virtual sort of organization before things were really virtual. And I had had a ton of agency exposure, had hired a lot of agencies. And so I knew a lot of super sharp creative people. And initially I teamed up with folks I had worked with before, um, and started to produce for the two industries that I knew best, which were banking and automotive, which is a pretty dry, it's a pretty dry slate, but it worked for me.
Oh, banking,
And
man. We try to break into banking. So, I don't know how you did it.
it's
Automotive, I could
rough.
do it.
It's rough. And I tell you, it's so interesting because the disclosure side of that, in terms of having to, disclose and validate and be transparent about everything you do, is as difficult as the strategy side, right? Like the artists, the designers just used to go crazy that you'd have, these amazing pieces, right? And half of it would be disclosure. At the time, I was very heavy in direct mail and in merchandising. So we spent a lot of time on um, things that folks don't do much anymore. But and I guess 15 years, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was. And I worked my way up to the point where I employed a staff, pulled people in. I had a professional photographer on board. I had a full-time designer. We still subbed out a number of different things. I had a media buyer who was working full-time. And then 2008, 2009, the recession hit. We had a lot of clients in home development at that point as well. We did banking, automotive, and home development. And so it was a real quick slide. Um, Over a period of time from about 2008 until about 2010, I attrited all of the folks who were working for the agency and went to a full virtual model. And like I said, stayed with it until about 2015. At that point, my biggest client was AutoNation. We were running they had a concierge program that went hand in hand with the financial industry. And so they were working with insurance companies and credit unions and all different kinds of companies to provide this um, sort of white label concierge product that we just syndicated again and again and again and again the branding for. And they took that model into their showrooms, and so we could see about 6 months before it was going to happen. Okay, we're gonna lose this book of business because they're going to take this model into their showrooms. And at that point, I just knew I had been in the game long enough, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to go into any more boardrooms and fight for any more business. That I think the agency business it takes a toll on you. And so I decided to shift my work toward women in midlife, which I was. And I was struggling with a lot of the questions that midlife women have around getting older and your value and your worth and your level of contribution. And so I decided to sort of shut it down as projects closed and help the team move on. And that's what I did. And now I have an immersion program where I help 15 women a year build their own personal brands and get out in front of what often are agency type businesses.
Oh, very cool. And so let's talk a little bit about kind of building a brand,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of, one of the things I tell agency owners is the key roles out of the 5 roles that when you transition to being the CEO rather than the owner of doing everything, is being the face of the organization. And you
Yes.
really have to build a brand around you and
Yes.
right, rather than being a
Hmm.
faceless company. So what are some of the, and and it's kind of funny too, right? Like if you think about it, like these agencies do this for other people,
Yes.
but they have a hard time doing it for themselves. So what can they actually do in order to build their brand, or what are some things?
So first of all, I think we all have a hard time doing it for ourselves because it requires a fair amount of chutzpah and it feels um, in your face, It's not natural for a lot of people to do this. I think there are a couple of ways that we can emerge. Number one is that we have to really get in touch with our essence. And a lot of times I meet people who will say, oh, I don't really have anything to brand. I don't have a differentiator. There's nothing different about me. But everybody is literally imbued with an essence, right? With whatever's your sort of concentrated flavor, concentrated scent. And if you can get down to that, it's all about attraction, right? Attraction is a singular thing. I'm attracted to a person's attracted back to me. Same thing with an organization. But an organization can't really make a decision about you and about your agency unless they can see you completely. Otherwise, they're making a decision on some kind of watered down version of you, right? Or some piece of you they can't see. And so I really, really encourage people to go out and get in touch with what is it that you're about, right? What's that combination of strength and skill and personality and tendencies and all those things that make you who you are. And I think when you then attach that to your values, which is becoming more and more common in terms of branding and really being a values-based brand, people really have a chance to connect. And that connection happens in a very real way that builds long-term relationships.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When I first started doing this business, or really even going back to the agency business, I really didn't put my personal brand out there, not at all.
Yeah,
You know,
it wasn't a thing.
you're right. Like until like Gary Vaynerchuk came along and everybody
Hmm.
was like, hustle, 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 which I'm like, you work hard and show up,
Yeah.
but you don't have to work all the time. But and then and then after I sold the agency, I really was like, okay, let me start doing videos like Gary, and it just wasn't clicking. And it was only up to maybe a couple years ago, I started just putting out a little bits and pieces about my journey or
Yes.
what I love doing, like mountain biking, or we started, we built our dream home in Colorado, and I started documenting that a little bit. Not like the check out our Ferraris or anything like
Yeah. Right.
that,
This
God
is
no.
this is my
But
life.
exactly. And so, but we started attracting people that love the outdoors, they love the adventure and
Yes.
all of that. And it's just like when we've been growing the mastermind, it's like, it's all these amazing people. And I'm like, and then I think back at what we started putting out, I was like, that's why. Like,
Yeah, that's
I'm
what you attracted. Yes.
exactly.
And it's interesting because early on, when I was building brand strategies for organizations, everybody talked about mission and vision, right? It was very common to do these mission and vision and values sort of seminars or weekend sessions for these big corporations. But there was never any question about whether the agency that was leading them or me shared those values. Right? It just wasn't the kind of thing that anybody talked about. And then as the internet made things more and more transparent and everybody came to want to know who is it that I'm doing business with, things really shifted. And you can see that now from big agency to small agency. I'm watching it happen in the arena of social justice right now, right? You can see agencies really clamoring to get a handle on how do we deal with this? How do we guide our clients through this, right? And on all different sides of the spectrum in terms of what you believe. But that connection is more important than ever. And we marry people who believe what we believe. We hang out with them, we date them, we vacation with them, right? We follow them, we read them. And it's just become, to some extent, I suppose it creates an echo chamber, right? But on the other side, it creates really strong relationships that allow your clients to talk out loud about the things they want to talk out loud about, knowing that you're invested in the outcome. I would never was invested in the outcome of my clients' businesses early on, right? That wasn't part of it. Now
Yeah.
I show up and I'm in it with the client. It's a very different world, I think, agency wise than it used to be.
Well, it's hard. Like looking back at some of the clients that we worked with, if I was doing a campaign for women's purses, I couldn't get behind it
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't have it. But if we were doing a campaign for Lotus cars, I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
like
Yep.
like
Totally.
I totally get it. So um, it makes a huge difference. You gotta, I was watching a video, and probably everybody has. I think it's from Simon Sinek on like Start With Why, and
Yes.
he talks about like you never hire or you work with people that are your identical twin, but you surround yourself with people that believe in similar things. And it allows you to really build that brand. Because when when I got into this business, helping agencies, I saw everybody just doing blog posts,
Yep.
and it had no personality. And I was like,
Yes.
I'm going to do video, I'm going to do a podcast, just so people can hear the tone or the joking around or whatever it is. And then, when they meet you, they're like, I know you, which is kind of freaky
Yeah, and what
sometimes.
you stand for. I think standing for something, the world has shifted in so many ways in America, right? And business and life are so intertwined now. And all of the money and the influence, things have just taken on a different shape. And I think people are much more inclined now to speak out loud about what they stand for. And I also think at a certain point in life, contribution takes on a different meaning. And I see this happen to a lot of people as they get older. And it definitely happened to me. As I started to push 50, the kind of contribution that I wanted to have in the world was different. It wasn't enough for me to just help corporations stuff dollar bills into their pocket, right? And support my lifestyle. I wanted to feel at the end of the day that I had made a difference in someone's life. And that caused me to step forward and say, okay, these are the things I believe in. These are the topics I'm willing to give voice to, right? This is what I stand for. Now, how do I find clients who stand for the same thing so I can help move them forward? And I think, not to say that that doesn't happen for young people, I think it does, but I think there's a point in our lives where it happens for everybody. You start to really rethink things. And that definitely happened for me in midlife.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's when you're in your 20s, all you're thinking about is what you don't have.
Yeah, and how are you going to survive? How are you going to make it? And what's your trajectory going to look like? And, we all start out with this idea of this is what my life's going to look like. I'm going to go to school here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to create this. I'm going to marry this person. I'm going to build a family. We don't have a lot of discussion around what happens after I do all that. Right? What happens when I'm 50? I've checked off all those boxes. Now do I start again? How do I pivot? And I think those of us that are in branding and advertising and messaging and marketing, there's a way to sort of pivot that mastery to something new in midlife that allows you to stay in the game and contribute on a different level. And a lot of that is very values based stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I realized, after I sold the agency, I was like, I was craving that significance again,
Yes.
and I was like, well, how can I contribute rather than, I felt like before then I was just a taker.
Yeah, and well, I think that's part of the game, right? I mean, that's the way it's all set up. Is you got to you got to make your way, you got to figure it out. And I think when we're young, we're not as geared toward how can I be useful as we are toward, and maybe it's not fair to say it's old and young. Maybe that's not really the way it breaks out. But I know when I was younger, I was much more interested in what it would take for me to get where I needed to go than I was in how do I be of service, right? And I think that's one of the things that happens the longer you've been in the game. You realize that it's really the service side and the purpose side that keeps you in it, right? That's what gets you to wake up every day and go, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this. The money side and the significant side, it lasts so long, but it feels a little hollow after a while. And I think I notice that's a trajectory for a lot of folks.
Yeah. What are some things, let's say there's a lot of people listening right now that are in the middle of their career. They're they're just kind of getting by. What are some of the things that they can do in building their brand and getting to a place where, it means a lot more to them? Because, I talk to so many people all day long. They're just like, I did this agency, I'm ready to get out because there's no real like meaning behind it.
Yeah, so I would start with manifesto work. I do manifesto work with tons of people, and I'm not talking about just around, making something pretty that you say out loud, but really understanding what are the things that you want to feel on a daily basis, right? How do you want to feel? How how do you imagine the perfect life being, for you and for other people? And What do you believe in? What are you willing to stand for? I very often ask my women clients, what are the issues that you're willing to give your voice to? And what are the issues that you would never give your voice to? Or what are the things that you stand against? And then go find clients that are making inroads in those areas. Go find clients with the money and the clout and the push that to ride what matters to you, because that's going to change the nature of the work. It's not about completing a project and getting paid. While that happens, it's about completing a project and changing the world or moving things forward. And I think when we're surrounded by like-minded people who are in a fight that we're in, everything shifts. And that and in my mind, that really starts with manifesto work.
Yeah. I love kind of the, just that simple concept that you mentioned of kind of like build your brand for what you stand for. Like
Yeah,
that, like, because, like you were saying in the beginning, a lot of people are like, well, how do I build a brand? Like, well, you already have a brand.
of
but it's,
course. You
but
live
it's,
it every day.
yeah, I'm like, it's just about communicating it and figuring
Yeah.
that out. And I always like to tell people it's not just with the written word, like, please do a podcast or video or
Yeah, it's who you
stories or whatever
are.
it is.
And we get this idea that we're creating it. We're building a brand. We're creating a brand. We're not creating it. We're showing it, right? This is what it is. How do I show it? How do I show people who I am, what I'm about, what I'm worth, what I stand for, what I want? And all of that can be really polarizing. It doesn't have to be, right? But it can be. And we're also afraid of that, right? If I show myself completely, there'll be people who don't like me, but there will also be people who love you,
Yeah.
people who get you, people who want to be next to you, people who want you to fight for them. And it's much easier to maintain longer, big money, intricate relationships if people love you, right?
Yeah.
Than if they're lukewarm around about
Well,
you.
it eliminates the bad clients later on.
It certainly does.
And like you going, man, I took this client on because I was a little strapped for cash, but now it's a complete nightmare blowing up in my face, which is
Yes,
making it even more miserable versus, maybe I didn't win as much business, but at the end of the day, you're going to win way more business and have a lot more fun working with the people that,
for sure.
are in the similar boat. So
And you're going to be able to stand up for yourself. The biggest emotion for me that was a killer in my agency career was resentment. Because I would have these clients who would come at me, and the very first thing they want to do is negotiate. And they wanted to negotiate on my value as a human, right? So it's, well, I don't want to pay you this, I'll pay you this. And in early on in my career, I would negotiate that. I would talk about that. It was only when I got to a point where I did the head work around, this is what I'm worth, this is what I stand for, I don't want to take that, right? I don't offer bad marketing. I would oftentimes I would have clients who say, well, we don't want to do this and we don't want to do the strategy work. We just want to do this. And when I finally got to the point where I would say, I don't offer that as a service. Like, I don't offer quick and dirty marketing. I'm sure there are people who do. I don't sell that. That everything started to shift for me. And that resentment, as soon as we sign on to a client or a relationship where we haven't properly set boundaries, we are in this resentful position until the relationship ends. And I watch agency owners do that over and over and over again, and they feel out of alignment with themselves all day long in order to
yeah.
take the money. And it's just a practice learning not to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have people all the time that are like, "We'll give you this amount for your
Yeah.
online program." I'm like, "No, it's this."
Yeah.
Or
Right. I
or the other day, I just was skimming through emails, and this one person was like, I read it like, "I just want to give you $500 because you helped me out." Like we get that all the time. I'm
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Sure, right?" But and then a couple days later, he's like, "I haven't got access to the agency playbook." I'm like, "What?" So I go back to the email and I read it.
Yeah.
Rather
Yeah.
than skimming it, right? Like my ADD is kicking in. And it was like, I'll give you $500 right now and you do the playbook. And I was like, sorry, I read it wrong. I'm refunding your
Hmm.
500.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then he was like, well, really? Like, you don't have to do anything. I was like, but you're not going to value it. Like you're already devaluing it.
Exactly. And I didn't offer you that. Right?
Exactly.
That's not for sale at that price. And I think, back to that original question we talked about around how can I be more strategic? How can I be a person with creative skills or project management skills who's more strategic? When you invest your time in that, like I had to force myself to go to MBA school, and I wasn't great at MBA school. It was not a natural state for me, but I did it, right? I really had to go. I'm in it. I am fully driven by intuition. Right. So data driven exercises are work for me, but I did the work. And when you make that shift, when you really can lay that strategic piece over top, it eliminates some of the discounting that people do about the creative side of things that they don't understand. It's very easy for people to discount that creative side of the work, right? And that messaging side and all of that understanding of human psychology. People don't value it. And so that when you can lay that strategic piece over top, I think you eliminate some of that, or you put yourself in a position where you can push back harder.
Yeah, I mean, once you start negotiating and lowering your prices, you're never going to get out of that because they're
Never.
always going to think you're coming out high. I mean, even when I was buying a car, I remember I went in, I did not want to buy a Jeep a couple years ago. And I went in and I just lowballed the crap out of them for this new Jeep. And they said, yes. I'm like, crap, I should have said lower.
Now
Like, I
I
didn't
got to
feel like
buy
I
the
got the
Jeep.
right deal.
Yeah. And here's the thing, never, ever, ever negotiate on your own hourly rate. I'll work less hours for you, right? And if we work less hours, this is the work product you're going to get. But I'm not going to work the same number of hours for less money because this is my business,
Yeah.
right?
And what,
This is my business. This is what I do.
yeah, and what people don't understand, especially what they'll do is they'll come back and be like, well, so and so over there on Upwork can do it for $20 an hour,
You
where
should
you're,
hire so and so.
and I'm like, well, here, you don't value your time as much as I thought you did. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, sure, you can go to them, but you're going to probably spend 4 times the amount of time
Yes.
managing this person in order to get what you want. And there, it's still like a 50-50 shot on
Yeah.
this versus going our way. And you'll probably get there 90% of the time and you'll have to require this amount of time.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't offer that service. I don't offer a service where
mhm,
clients cycle through the internet and randomly choose me
yeah,
with no ramp up and no relationship and no understanding of their product or their goals or their financial statements so that I can do a 4-hour job.
yeah,
I don't have that service. I can see if you want to buy that, but that's not what we sell here, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I think that that tie back to this is the relationship, this is why we're working together, this is what we're in together, this is what we're trying to accomplish. That's what an agency does. An agency doesn't present itself on the web and blind of any relationship, deliver creative product willy-nilly. That's a different business model.
well, I even think like, even if you go back to kind of the origin of an agency, like they were the middlemen, right?
Yeah.
Between, like, I mean, you kind of, I remember I was doing a video a long time ago about you're in the car industry, right? So remember, well, no one remembers when cars first came out. We're
Not
not
anymore.
around, right? So I always like put my foot in my mouth and be like, you remember this? And then I know my
Not
team would have been
anymore.
like,
Nobody
good
remembers it
God.
anymore.
Yeah. And so so when they actually came out with cars, they couldn't go direct. They had to create, the car dealers.
Yeah.
So they were the middlemen. But even now the car dealers are probably going to start suffering because of the manufacturers can go direct. Same thing with, Facebook. When they came out with advertising, they went to agencies.
Yes.
Now Facebook is more going directly into there. And so the whole point about it, like being the agency, it's about not just being that middleman, but being strategic and building that relationship with those people, like you were saying. And that's really how you can be strategic. And then they
And
can never really leave you until you say, buzz off.
and understanding how the industry works, for a very long time I made the lion's share of my personal money negotiating advertising for people, right? This is how this works, this is the space you're going to get, this is how many people are going to see it, this is how we're going to use it, this is who's going to see it, right? And those were all negotiations that our agency made on behalf of the clients, and for that we got paid. We didn't get paid by the client, we got paid by the media company because we were professionals who understood the industry and understood those demographics and understood that
Mhm.
region, right? So I think that since all of the freelancing has started and all of the sort of talents inside an agency have been broken off, clients have lost sight of the value of having someone stand in between what I'm trying to accomplish as a corporation or, as a business, as a person, and what this creative person is supposed to deliver. There's a translation there that happens in a real agency model. And without that, that relationship suffers.
Yep.
You get a different relationship.
Awesome. Well, this has all been amazing. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the audience?
I think there's some benefit around understanding the way creative people work for agency owners, for people who are listening, right? Like you said, you came up, from that project management side or down in the project. I think one of the things that makes a really amazing and profitable agency is understanding that creatives are constantly and always giving a piece of themselves, right? Every job that a creative professional does, whether I'm a writer, a photographer, a designer, or whatever, is an extension of self. That at least the folks who are good, right? Every time they're putting out a piece of themselves, and that's a really difficult. It's a tender process to manage, and when CEOs or business owners go direct to the creatives, oftentimes that process ends in resentment as well. And so that's a piece of leadership, I think, in the agency world that sometimes gets kicked to the curb. And I think there's a real sweet spot in there. There's a real understanding of human potential there that separates one agency from the next.
Awesome. Where, if you're, since you only work with women in their midlife,
Yeah.
if you're a woman in your midlife, where can they go and
So you
and
can
get
find
more
me
from
at
you?
jujuhook.com. I have a download always at free.primetimejuju.com. That helps with personal branding, always with personal branding out in front. And I have a group of 15 women every year who I take through a 9-month immersion branding program called The Cut.
Awesome. Well, everybody go check that out. And thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you guys enjoyed this episode and you want to be surrounded by amazing agency owners on a consistent basis where we can really build that relationship with you and see the things that you may not be able to see and help catapult and grow your agency to where you want it to go, rather than where it's going to dictate you to go, I want to invite all of you to go to digitalagencyelite.com. That's digitalagencyelite.com. And until next time, have a swank day.